An Epic History TV PMF Productions collaboration. In 1796, at the height of the French Revolutionary Wars, a young French general took charge of a ragged, demoralized army in northern Italy. It was his first command. Many expected him to fail. Instead, in just 1 month, he won his first brilliant campaign. With astonishing self-confidence, boldness, and energy, he led his army to victory after victory, transforming the war in Europe, winning praise from a grateful republic, and forging a legend. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte's first campaign and the dawn of a new age. 1792. Europe is plunged into conflict by revolution in France. At first, it seems this infant republic will be quickly snuffed out by her neighbors. Incredibly, France clings on thanks to mass mobilization, patriotic fervor, and her traditional military power. In 1795, France occupies the Low Countries, while Prussia and Spain withdraw from the war. But the French Republic still faces a powerful coalition of enemies, which includes the Austrian Empire and kingdoms of Piedmont, Sardinia, Naples, and Great Britain, as well as a counter-revolutionary revolt in the Vendée region of western France. In Paris, the most extreme revolutionaries had been toppled, sent to the guillotine, as they had sent so many before them. France is now governed by the Directory, a more moderate 5-man committee, which quickly wins a reputation for corruption and inefficiency. Nevertheless, in 1796, they plan a major military offensive to knock their most dangerous adversary, Austria, out of the war. The two main efforts will be made along the Rhine by powerful armies under General Jourdan and General Moreau. A third effort, of which much less is expected, will be made in northern Italy. The French army of Italy is a poor cousin, starved of money and supplies, stripped of troops to reinforce French forces on the Rhine, but its fortunes are about to change. On the 2nd of March, 1796, the Directory appoint a new commander to lead the army, one of France's youngest generals, Napoleon Bonaparte. We're delighted to welcome back as video sponsor NapoleonSouvenirs.com, the online shop for all fans of the Napoleonic era. Since 2010, the team at NapoleonSouvenirs.com has offered the finest quality gifts and souvenirs for all those who adore the Napoleonic era. Their enormous range of gifts includes busts of the Emperor himself, replica Napoleonic firearms, flags, statuettes, imperial eagles, and uniforms, and sensational replica swords and sabers, as well as our old favorite, a replica baton of a French Maréchal. You can visit their online store at NapoleonSouvenirs.com, or if you're in Paris, visit the Boutique Napoleon in person. Vive l'Empereur! And big thanks to NapoleonSouvenirs.com for sponsoring this video. Napoleon arrives at the Army of Italy's headquarters in Nice on the 25th of March. He is just 26 years old. 2 years have passed since he masterminded French victory at the Siege of Toulon. Since then, his fortunes have been mixed. A short spell as artillery commander in Italy, 10 days in jail when his political patrons fell from power. He then refused to serve in the Vendée, fighting French counter-revolutionaries, leading to several months' unemployment in Paris. Then, an extraordinary break. 13 Vendémiaire, Paris. A royalist mob threatens to storm the national government. Napoleon is the closest general to hand and put in charge of its defense. He disperses the crowds with brutal efficiency and is acclaimed savior of the revolution. A grateful Directory promotes Napoleon to General of Division and awards him command of the Army of Italy. On the 9th of March, he marries his great love, Joséphine de Beauharnais, and leaves for the front 2 days later. There are French generals in Italy with a better claim to command than Napoleon. Serrurier, a professional soldier who first saw action in the 7 Years' War, a decade before Napoleon was born. Augereau, a tough, experienced soldier, bold tactician, and committed republican. And Massena, risen from the ranks, fearless, tireless, hero of the Battle of Loarno against the Austrians the year before. All three would later become marshals of Napoleon's empire. For now, Napoleon seems to these veterans young and underqualified, a political appointment, embarrassingly infatuated with his new wife. But there is something about the Corsican. As Massena observed, his small size and puny face did not put him in their favor, but as soon as he donned his general's hat, he seemed to grow by 2 feet. Napoleon impresses above all with his tireless energy, and he has much to do. His army is organized into Massena's advance guard of 2 divisions, one led by a hard-fighting Swiss general La Harpe, and the other by Meunier, whom Napoleon soon decides is incompetent. The main body comprises the divisions of Augereau, Serrurier, and 2 smaller divisions under Macquart and Garnier. The cavalry is led by General Stengel. But the army of Italy has been shockingly neglected by the Directory. The men are hungry and unpaid, with a few units on the verge of mutiny. Some men don't even have shoes or muskets. Napoleon inspects the troops and studies reports. He enforces discipline and breaks up rotten units. He is assisted by his aide-de-camp, Junot, Marmont, and a dashing cavalry colonel, Joachim Murat. As emperor, Napoleon will make 2 of these men dukes and 1 a king. His most valuable assistant is his new chief of staff, General Berthier, who helps him to reorganize the army's supply system and scour southern France for food, transport, and forage. The situation begins to improve. But Napoleon knows what will really rejuvenate his ragged divisions: victory in battle and the promise of plunder. Napoleon has spent 2 years studying the situation in northern Italy, while he, in his first campaign, has demonstrated extraordinary energy and the history of past wars here. Mastery of detail. He has developed clear plans on how the campaign must be fought. Now he will put them into action. Brilliant military intuition. Above all, indomitable self-belief. Napoleon, with 38,000 troops, outnumbers the Piedmontese and the Austrian army. But if they combine, he will be outnumbered, so he must prevent this at all costs. It is this quality that inspires his soldiers to risk their lives for glory, for the Republic, and for the man they will one day acclaim their emperor. His plan bears all the hallmarks of what will become known as Massena's division has begun to arrive from the south, the Napoleonic art of war. A bold, rapid advance. Not against the expected target, Genoa, but Dago. Here he will occupy the central position and prize his enemies apart. He knows that when threatened, the Piedmontese will retreat on their capital Turin, the Austrians on Milan. With his enemies divided, unable to support each other, he can defeat each in detail. Napoleon's plan will be aided by the fragility of the Austro-Piedmontese alliance. They regard each other with deep distrust after years of rivalry. The new Austrian commander, General Beaulieu, is experienced and was once considered energetic, but he is now 70 years old and does not know Italy, bringing his strength up to 15,000 men and 30 guns. Napoleon makes a speech to the infantry, taunting them, daring them to take the bridge, then orders them forward. To cries of "Vive la République!" the hardened 2nd Carabinier Battalion leads the charge. They come under torrential fire from the Austrian guns. But urged on by Napoleon, Berthier, Massena, Lannes, and others, French infantry surge across, under, and around the bridge. Faced with this irresistible onslaught, the Austrian front line crumbles. And with French cavalry across the river to the north, the rest of the Austrian rearguard begins an orderly withdrawal. 5 days after his victory at Lodi, he is convinced the French will target Genoa, the port used by the British to supply their coalition allies, so much so that he rejects Piedmontese plans for close cooperation. Their troops remain scattered across mountain passes in a general defense against invasion. On the 4th of April, Napoleon moves his headquarters forward to Albenga in preparation for his offensive, but Beaulieu strikes first. On the 10th of April, Austrian troops take Voltri to disrupt the expected French attack on Genoa. The small French garrison falls back to join Massena's advance guard at Savona, but Beaulieu's fixation with Genoa is playing into Napoleon's hands. Dago, with its vital crossroads that link the Piedmontese and Austrian armies, is covered by just 8,000 men of Argenteau's corps. Napoleon leads his army into the city of Milan. They are welcomed by cheering crowds, though in reality, Italians are deeply divided in their attitudes towards the French. After Lodi, French soldiers have a new nickname for their general, Le Petit Caporal, the Little Corporal. It's a term of affection because he gets his hands dirty, even aiming the guns himself, the job of an artillery corporal. In just a month, Napoleon has transformed a war-weary, disheveled and demoralized army into a victorious fighting force, brimming with esprit de corps and eager for further conquests. But he grows impatient. Napoleon sends Beaumont's cavalry brigade upstream to look for a ford so they can cross the river and flank the Austrian defenses. Mountainous terrain means Beaulieu can only march to Argenteau's aid via Acqui, more than 20 miles to the north. What's more, Argenteau has orders to take French positions at Montenotte as a diversion for the attack at Voltri, but the French cling on courageously. Corporal Roache particularly distinguishes himself, exposing himself to enemy fire to shoot down on the enemy. His commander, Colonel Rampont, tells his men, "Here we must conquer or die," a moment which quickly enters French military folklore. It's the perfect setup for Napoleon. The enemy's attention is focused on Voltri, and Argenteau's corps has been left dangerously exposed. He swings into action, sending La Harpe's division to reinforce Rampont's troops, while Massena makes a tough night march across steep ravines in rain and fog to turn Argenteau's right flank. By dawn, the Austrians are outnumbered, outflanked, and under heavy attack. They retreat in disarray. Napoleon orders Massena to move on Dago, while he turns his attention to the Piedmontese. But Augereau's advance gets held up at Corseria. The old castle is held by Piedmontese and Croatian grenadiers. The French launch frontal attacks into withering fire and suffer hundreds of casualties. When the colonel of the 18th Demi Brigade is killed, a 26-year-old Louis Gabriel Suchet takes over command. "I have never seen fire like it," wrote Marmont, Napoleon's aide-de-camp. Despite heroic resistance, the hopelessly outnumbered garrison surrenders the next day. With Serurier's division also advancing from the south, Piedmontese commander General Colli has little choice but to abandon his position at Montezemolo. The same day, under Napoleon's watchful eye, Massena takes Dago. But while La Harpe's division moves off to reinforce Augereau, hungry French troops left in Dago turn to plunder and pillage. No one spots Colonel Vukasovic, a tough Croatian commander, approaching with 3,000 reinforcements. He attacks at dawn, routing the French and retaking Dago with ease. It requires the recall of La Harpe's division and another day of heavy combat before Vukasovic can be driven out of Dago. A bayonet charge led by 27-year-old Colonel Lannes wins particular praise from General Bonaparte. Napoleon has won 3 victories in 4 days. The marches and battles have been grueling, but he has achieved his first objective. The Austrians are regrouping at Acqui and will soon retreat to Alessandria. They can offer no support to the Piedmontese. And so General Colli orders another withdrawal to a strong defensive position behind the Corsalia River. The final peace treaty, signed 3 weeks later in Paris, cedes Nice and Savoie to France and grants free passage to French armies. Napoleon has ended the 4-year war with Piedmont in less than 3 weeks. The army of Italy has little time to rest on its laurels. 4 days later, having received 7,000 reinforcements and fresh supplies, it's on the move again. Napoleon plans to invade the rich province of Lombardy, ruled by the Emperor of Austria, and defeat Beaulieu's army. But first he must cross the Po River, which is closely watched by Austrian forces. It will prove one of Napoleon's most brilliant maneuvers. Massena is ordered to make conspicuous preparations to cross the river near Sale. assembling boats and building gun batteries. Meanwhile, Napoleon has formed a new elite brigade, 5,000 grenadiers, carabiniers, and chasseurs, to act as the army's advance guard, under the command of General d'Allemagne. This force is ordered to march rapidly east to Piacenza and cover 40 miles in just 36 hours. They are followed by La Harpe's division, then Augereau, and the cavalry. Beaulieu receives reports that French troops are moving east and begins to redeploy his forces, while remaining conscious that there are still French troops that might cross the Po as far west as Valença. This uncertainty makes it impossible for him to concentrate his forces. What's more, he's completely underestimated the scale and speed of Napoleon's move. The French advance guard, with Colonel Lannes in the lead, crosses the Po on the 7th of May, chasing off Austrian patrols that are the only opposition. By the next morning, most of La Harpe's and Augereau's divisions and the cavalry are across, consolidating the French bridgehead, while Massena and Serrurier move to the crossing as fast as they can. Men of General Lita's division are the closest Austrian troops. They take up defensive positions at Fonbio, but are overwhelmed by the French attack. That evening, Beaulieu's advance guard arrives, expecting to reinforce Liptai. Instead, they blunder into La Harpe's division. In confused night fighting, General La Harpe is shot dead, possibly by friendly fire. Napoleon regards him as one of the army's best generals, and his loss a great blow. Beaulieu, realizing that the French have crossed the Po in force and now threaten to cut him off, orders a rapid withdrawal east. Milan is to be sacrificed. The great fortress of Mantua will be his next refuge. The French advance guard is soon in pursuit. On the morning of the 10th of May, they catch the Austrian rearguard at Lodi. French troops chase the Austrians across town. Napoleon orders an immediate attack, and over the town's 200-yard bridge over the river Adda. Augereau's division on the right, Serrurier on the left, Massena in support. But the French, under heavy fire, struggle to cross the swollen river with its steep banks. When Serrurier's troops finally get into San Michele, they immediately begin looting the town and are thrown out by a counterattack. Despite his success, Colli is still heavily outnumbered and fears encirclement. The following evening, he begins a covert withdrawal to Mondovì. But Napoleon is not deceived by the fake campfires. Patrols confirm his suspicions. The Piedmontese are pulling back. Though his troops are exhausted, wet, and hungry, he launches them after the fleeing enemy. Colli's troops are caught before they can establish a new defensive line. The brave and popular General Dicat is killed. Retreat turns to rout. The French enter Mondovì in triumph, where at last, briefly, they can eat and rest. General Colli, his defeated troops scattered and demoralized, requests an armistice. An artillery duel rages for much of the afternoon. Napoleon soon arrives and positions guns to bombard the Austrians on the far bank. Napoleon declines as his troops descend from the mountains into the fertile plain of Piedmont. Several more battalions and cavalry squadrons are behind them in reserve. Destitute and starved, French soldiers now plunder the Italian countryside freely. Around 6,500 men in total. They find the bridge is swept by fire from 14 guns. Brigadier General Joubert is among those frustrated by the men's conduct. Its far end is held by 3 battalions of Croatian infantry. Everything would go very well if the soldiers did not abandon themselves to pillage. Not a day passes without some looters being shot. Piedmont must give up the strategic fortresses at Cuneo and either Alessandria or Tortona, leaving the country virtually defenseless. Despite this severity, the mania doesn't stop, but when they try to follow, the rural folk are arming themselves. Napoleon condemns such behavior. Victor Amadeus III, King of Piedmont Sardinia, sees no option but to accept Bonaparte's terms for an armistice. But his orders have limited impact. especially as everyone knows Generals Massena and Augereau to be two of the greatest offenders. Austrian troops join in the plunder of Piedmontese villages as they go. On the 25th of April, French troops enter Carrasco, just 30 miles south of the Piedmontese capital, Turin. And when he learns that Piedmont has opened negotiations with the enemy, he withdraws his troops in disgust, planning to take up new positions along the Po River. Meanwhile, General Beaulieu is at long last marching to Piedmont's aid, but he is a week late.